The Genius Club with Prairie Pine. Chapter 63. The Murderer. Professor Hughes! Alex scream tore through the cold night air, raw with grief and disbelief, echoing off the empty buildings, lining the quiet side road. The thick, coppery stench of blood hung heavy in the air, sharp and suffocating, making his scalp prickle with a bone-deep unease that settled into every nerve in his body. That strange, disorienting feeling of being disconnected from the world washed over him again, like he was watching the tragedy unfold from outside his own body, while a deafening ringing in his ears drowned out all other sounds, even Emma's choked sobs beside him. He had grown accustomed to bloodshed and horror in his recurring dreams, where death was just a temporary setback, a loop to be reset with each new sleep. But this was different. This was reality, harsh, unforgiving, and irreversible. When a person died here, they stayed dead. There would be no do-over, no second chance to save them. The man who had just laughed with him, who had shared his dreams of waking his daughter, who had finally found hope after a lifetime of struggle, was gone forever, his lifeless body lying broken in the snow. Alex's hands trembled uncontrollably as he stared at the gruesome wound stretching from Professor Hughes' skull to his abdomen, the sight searing itself into his memory. He thought of the professor's gentle smile, his quiet determination, his unwavering love for his comatose daughter. He had come so close to seeing his lifelong dream come true, so close to holding his daughter in his arms again, and yet he had been torn from the world before he could taste a single moment of that long-awaited happiness. The wail of an ambulance cut through the silence, its red and blue lights painting the snow-covered road in a haunting, flickering glow. As it pulled up beside them, paramedics rushed out with stretchers and medical equipment, their movements urgent but solemn as they examined Professor Hughes' body, shaking their heads in defeat before carefully lifting him onto the stretcher and covering him with a white sheet. Alex and Emma followed silently in Emma's car, the drive to the hospital passing in a numbing blur. The once festive atmosphere of the New Year's Eve banquet felt like a distant memory, replaced by a heavy, suffocating grief that hung over them like a dark cloud. Neither spoke a word. There were no words that could ease the pain of what they had just witnessed. They sat side by side on the hard plastic chairs outside the emergency room, their heads bowed, eyebrows furrowed with sorrow and exhaustion. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor cast a cold, clinical glow over everything, and the only sounds were the distant beeping of medical monitors, the soft murmur of nurses' voices, and the occasional echo of footsteps down the empty hallway. Time dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity as they waited for news they already knew deep down. Bang bang. The heavy metal door of the emergency operating room swung open with a sharp, jarring sound, breaking the tense silence. A doctor, his face hidden behind a surgical mask, his scrubs stained with faint splotches of blood, stepped out, his shoulders slumping with visible fatigue and regret. "Doctor, how is Professor Hughes?" Alex and Emma jumped to their feet, their voices trembling with a desperate hope that they both knew was misplaced. They rushed forward, their eyes fixed on the doctor's face, clinging to the smallest possibility that he might bring good news. The doctor closed his eyes slowly, a deep, weary sigh escaping his lips before he shook his head gently. A simple gesture that crushed whatever remaining hope Alex and Emma had left. He pulled out a crumpled stack of medical papers from his pocket, his fingers flipping through them as he spoke in a somber, matter-of-fact tone that felt cruel in its detachment. The deceased suffered extremely severe injuries, he said, his voice muffled by the mask. Skull fracture, exposed cranial and thoracic cavities, extensive deep lacerations, and fatal blood loss. He was pronounced dead on the scene, before the ambulance even arrived. He held out a form, his eyes shifting between Alex and Emma, his expression softening slightly with sympathy. Which one of you is a family member? I need a signature here to confirm the death and proceed with the necessary procedures. Alex's shoulders sagged, his head shaking slowly as a wave of helplessness washed over him. Doctor, we're not family, he said, his voice hoarse and broken. Professor Hughes lost his parents when he was young, and his wife died from an illness many years ago. He only has a daughter, who's been in a coma for a long time. We're his friends and colleagues. The doctor nodded slowly, a look of understanding crossing his face as he put away the form. I see. Then I'll contact the relevant authorities to handle the formalities. You two can stay here for a while if you want, or you can leave and we'll inform you if there's any update. Emma nodded numbly, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her body trembling slightly as she leaned against the wall for support. Alex helped her to sit back down on the chair, his own legs feeling weak, as if he could collapse at any moment. After the doctor left, the corridor fell into a deathly silence again. Emma buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as silent sobs escaped her lips. Alex sat beside her, staring blankly at the cold, white wall in front of him, his mind empty and his heart heavy with grief and guilt. If only he had insisted on sending Professor Hughes home. If only he had not let him take that taxi. If only he had noticed the strange behavior of the taxi driver earlier. So many if-onlys swirled around in his mind, each one stabbing at his heart like a sharp knife. He thought back to the moment Professor Hughes walked toward the taxi. The driver's face was completely covered, his voice muffled, and there was something strange about his posture, something that had made Alex feel uneasy at the time, but he had brushed it off as paranoia. Now, it all made sense. That taxi driver was not a random stranger. He was part of the plan, a tool used to lure Professor Hughes into a trap. And the black sedan that had hit the professor, its headlights off, its speed terrifyingly fast, was clearly waiting for the right moment to strike. This was no accident. It was a carefully planned murder. But who would want to kill Professor Hughes? What motive could there be for such a cruel act? Alex's mind raced as he tried to piece together the clues, his grief slowly giving way to a burning anger and determination to find the truth. Professor Hughes had just completed his lifelong research on hibernation technology, a breakthrough that could change the world. He had planned to make the technology public, to help countless people with incurable diseases, to give them a chance to wake up in a future where they could be cured. Could that be the reason? Could someone be afraid of the impact his research would have? Maybe a powerful organization or individual who wanted to keep the technology for themselves, to use it for their own gain. Or perhaps someone who saw Professor Hughes as a threat, someone who wanted to silence him before he could share his discovery with the world. Alex's fists clenched tightly, his nails digging into his palms, leaving deep red marks. He thought of the taxi driver's hidden face, the black sedan that had disappeared without a trace, the cold, calculated way the attack had been carried out. This was not the work of a single person. It was a conspiracy. "We have to find them," Alex said suddenly, his voice hoarse but firm, breaking the silence. Emma looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion and sorrow. Find who? She asked, her voice trembling. The people who killed Professor Hughes, Alex said, his eyes burning with determination. We can't let them get away with this. Professor Hughes dedicated his life to his research, to helping others. He didn't deserve to die like this. Emma nodded slowly, a flicker of determination appearing in her tear-filled eyes. You're right. We have to find the truth, for Professor Hughes and for his daughter. Alex took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart and clear his mind. He knew that finding the murderers would not be easy. They had covered their tracks well, disappearing into the night without leaving any clues. But he was not going to give up. He thought of Cece, the girl from his dreams. Could she be connected to this? Or was that just his overactive imagination, a result of his confusion between reality and dream? He didn't know, but he knew that he needed to find answers. Answers that might be hidden in his dreams. Answers that could help him uncover the truth about Professor Hughes' murder. The cold, fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor continued to cast a harsh glow over them, but Alex felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. He would not rest until the murderers were brought to justice. He would honor Professor Hughes' memory by finishing what he had started, by ensuring that his research was made public, and by finding the truth behind his tragic death.